Member for Saanich North and Islands.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is through you to the Minister of Children and Family Development. Does the Minister recognize the ugly history between MCFD and Indigenous children and families is rooted in harm and mistrust, and that this scarred relationship remains to this day?
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. We do recognise that for many, many decades, there has been an over-intrusion of government into Indigenous families and Indigenous communities, and our government is taking steps to address that. We've changed the provincial law that enable MCFD staff to be able to work closely with Indigenous communities when there's a concern about an Indigenous child. Social workers are able to actually approach Indigenous communities, ask if there's somebody there, an auntie or a relative who's able to offer a safe home for that child so that children and youth can stay connected to their family, to their community and to their culture. Honourable Speaker, we've also increased the rate for out-of-care carers so that they receive the same financial support as foster carers. And so we've seen a significant increase in the number of Indigenous children that are in out-of-care placements rather than being brought into the government child welfare system. But, Honourable Speaker, there is a lot more to do. And even with the Federal Act coming into power, we know that there is a lot more to do. We are absolutely committed to doing that work with Indigenous communities.
Member supplemental.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate the response, and I think the minister needs to check in with some within the ministry to see if the changes that have been put in place are actually being implemented on the ground. But I am challenged, Mr. Speaker, with the minister's response and how it can be squared with subjecting neurodiverse Indigenous children to her proposed MCFD-run hubs. The proposal will arguably deepen access barriers for Indigenous and racialized people who are disproportionately targeted by MCFD. Their families are frequently ripped apart by the consequences of systemic racism within that ministry. This system will further disadvantage Indigenous and racialized children. It creates new and deeper barriers within a system that is, by its very nature, focused on individualized and diverse community service opportunities and possibilities. Further, by moving to an MCFD-controlled and centralized hub model, the opportunities for culturally appropriate services is further reduced. Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister of Children and Family Development, does she expect neurodiverse Indigenous children and families to feel safe accessing an MCFD-run hub?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the opportunity of explaining to members here that services for children and youth with support needs will be delivered by community, in community, and in response to the needs of the community. We actually have an advisory circle, an Indigenous circle, advising us on how we move forward to ensure that not only are we able to create Indigenous-led services, but that all services are culturally safe and properly informed, and that all staff have the appropriate training and knowledge and experience and expertise to make sure that all services delivered in community are culturally safe and accessible. And I would like to take this opportunity to inform the member that these services will be delivered by community agencies and by Indigenous agencies. They will have multidisciplinary teams and have multiple points of access. Our expectation as the ministry will be that community agencies will step up in collaboration and partnership with local communities, local nations and local agencies. And the work that the ministry has done, Honourable Speaker, over the last 4 years has been significant. There has been a significant change in our approach to working with Indigenous communities. We have changed provincial legislation, we have changed policy and practice, and currently we have the lowest number of Indigenous children and youth in care in 20 years.